the therapeutic welfare state of today, which Nietzsche anticipates conceptually. Quote, "What they seek to achieve with all their powers is the general green pasture happiness of the herd, with security, no hazards, convenience, ease of the life of everyone. Their two most worn-out ballads and teachings are called equality of rights and compassion for all the suffering. And suffering itself is seen by them as something that must be eradicated." And in another passage, he writes, "Whoever examines the conscience of the contemporary European will always have the same imperative to pull out of the thousand moral creases and hiding spots, the imperative of the herd fearfulness. We want that someday there will be nothing to fear. Someday. Everywhere today in Europe, the will and path towards this is called progress. The cultural and social price for this improvement is enormous. Quote, "The costs of all sum up to an overall loss. Man became less, so that one doesn't know anymore for what this monstrous process was actually good for. For what? A new for what? That is what mankind needs." High culture and cultural blossom, said Nietzsche, are contrariwise always to be expected when life is dangerous and unsafe. Quote, "We contraries, who have opened up an eye and a conscience for this question, where and how so far the plant human has grown the strongest and highest, we mean that this always happened under contrary conditions, that the situation of man has to become very dangerous, that his creativity and imagination, his mind, will develop under long pressure and force into the fine and brave. This will to live has to be raised to the absolute will of power. We believe that harshness, violence, slavery, danger on the street and in the heart, hiddenness, stoicism, temptation arts and devilishness of every kind, that everything evil, scary, tyrannical, predator and snake-like of man leads as well to the uplifting of the species human as the opposite. Nietzsche imagines that this aristocracy of mind that one day will undertake the re-evaluation of all values, will recruit itself among those people that suffer from the conditions under nihilism and decadence the most. Quote, "You lonesome ones of today, you shall be one folk one day. Out of yourselves shall grow a chosen folk, and out of it the Übermensch." Imagine this an elite that does not place its own happiness in the center, but that feels obligated to making the greatest efforts. Quote, "It is this the basic idea of culture, insofar as this knows to give every one of us one task, the creation of the philosopher, the artist, and the saint within us, and aside from nurturing us, and therein to work on the perfection of nature. Modes of behavior and attitudes that nurture such a life, directed at the philosophical, Nietzsche explains under the title 10 Commandments of the Free Spirit as follows. 10 Commandments. You shall not love nor hate. the folk. You shall not do politics. You shall not be rich, not a beggar. You shall avoid the famous and powerful. You shall take your wife out of another folk than your own. You shall let your children be raised by your friends. You shall not subjugate yourself to any ceremony of the church. You shall not regret a misdoing, but because of it, you shall do a good deed more. You should, in order to say the truth, favor exile. You should let the world do as it likes, and let the world let you do as you like. Nietzsche uses the term free spirit often. In contrast, he saw anarchism appropriate to his time as a variation of socialism and unmistakably rejected it. Against the thesis that Nietzsche is a right-wing anarchist in the Mises Rothbard tradition is his way of thinking, which has no roots in either the Aristotelian or Epicurean eudaimonism, nor in utilitarism, nor in liberalism. Classical English liberalism is definitely identified as proto-socialistic and thrown in one pot with socialism. Quote, liberal institutions make one small, cowardly, and idle. With them, herd animal triumphs every time. Liberalism, in German, herd animalization. In addition, liberal institutions, quote, stop being liberal as soon as they are reached. Later on, there are no worse and more efficient destroyers of freedom than liberal institutions, which with Nietzsche, I think, is quite right. Nietzsche's own definition of freedom sounds like the following. What is freedom? That you have the will to self-responsibility. That one becomes indifferent to hardship, harshness, deprivation, and even life. That one is ready to sacrifice man, including oneself, for the cause. Freedom means that the manly, the instincts joyful of war and victory, rule over the other instincts, for example, over the ones of happiness. The freed man, even more, the freed spirit, tramples with his feet the despicable kind of well-being that grocers, Christians, cows, broads, the English, and other Democrats dream of. The free man is a warrior. The folk that were worth something or became worthy never became so under liberal institutions. The great danger made something out of them, which deserves awe. The danger which teaches us about our tools, our virtues, our defense and weapons, and our spirit, which forces us to be strong. The first principle, one has to have the need to be strong, or one will never be it. The classical liberal view of freedom as a theory of equal rights, quote, the idea of equality, which appears in the idea of equal rights, basically belongs to decadence. The abyss between man and man, class and class, the multiplicity of types, the will to be yourself, the race to raise oneself, that is what I call pathos of distance, belongs to every strong age. The elasticity and distance between the extremes gets smaller and smaller nowadays. The extremes themselves are finally blurred into likeness. Nietzsche identifies the fight of classical liberalism for equal rights for everyone as an expression of ressentiment, he uses the French word, as an expression to revenge of the little man, as an expression of revenge of the little man, which can be seen as a political constant, as the ideological root of the therapeutic welfare state of today. Important, however, said Nietzsche, is the very opposite, quote, that everyone is freed of revenge. That is my bridge to the highest hopes and the rainbow after long downfall. Together with the liberal tradition, the liberal economic science is rejected, because for Nietzsche it is a co-perpetrator of the development of the modern world. Nietzsche always mentions politics and economics in one go, quote, to save the society from thieves and fire and make it endlessly comfortable for every exchange and change, and to transform the state's destiny into a good and bad sense, these are lower, lukewarm, and completely dispensable goals. Our era, as much as it talks about economics, is a waste. It's a waster. It wastes the most precious thing, the spirit. Nietzsche's fundamental critique goes so far that he rejects the European culture of mind as a whole, beginning with Socrates. To him, the history of European philosophy is a history of decadence, which was accelerated by the triumph of Christianity as slave religion. This little, ugly, pox-scared, overweight, and poor Socrates is to Nietzsche the beginning of ressentiment, the origin of modern, revengeful intellectuals. With his cleverness, Socrates takes revenge on the rich, the powerful, and the beautiful, and thinks that because he is so clever, he is now the one in charge. This, however, says Nietzsche, is the mistake of the enlightenment par excellence, that the clever man, the reasoning and arguing man, ought to set the tone and call the shots. Because what came out of this in the end, we can clearly see today. That a philosopher speaks against Socrates is truly remarkable. Here Nietzsche stands almost alone with this, but one can understand what he means. The core evil, which started with Socrates, is rationalism, which is with its tendency to asceticism, which flattens life like a pressing iron. The rational tradition tamed the humans, and that is exactly what Nietzsche is against. Nietzsche's central value is what he calls life, and he meant life in its highest possible manifestation. Passion also belongs to life, and this should be a Dionysian, a dangerous life, not simply a good or even a comfortable life. The central point seems to be the following. Certainty or truth are not the highest values for Nietzsche. Valuating itself is the highest value. Valuating comes first. Quote, the question of value is more fundamental than the question of certainty. The latter acquires its earnest only under the requirement that the question of value is answered.